Coming up in this episode, whilst out on patrol with the keeper, we find signs of the Red Menace. So, myself, Mark and a couple of the team head out to see what we can find, and we come across some very big boys.
Yeah, that is a big one. He is nearly £20.
We also take a look at some of Team Foxer members from around the country and abroad to see how they've been getting on, and I consider whether 2 rabbits and 1 bullet is a viable option.
Hey guys, welcome back to Team Foxer, and in tonight's action-packed episode you're going to see plenty of foxing action from myself and the team over the last couple of weeks. If you're really impatient and want to get straight into the action, simply skip to this time down below to get cracking with the videos. Otherwise, stick around and I'm going to talk a little bit about calling. Now, a question that crops up time and time again is, what type of caller do you use and what type of calls work best? Well, I'll try and do my best to answer a couple of those questions right now. Okay, so let's talk calling. What are the best callers to use? Well, personally, I have 3. They're my absolute go-to callers and never go foxing without them. The first of which is an electronic caller. Now, this is the GC500 from Icotec, and it's available from bestfoxcall.co.uk. A fantastic electronic caller with probably the world's best selection of downloadable calls to the SD card that simply slots in the back here. Now, if you follow my social media Instagram account, you'll know that I actually lost this one last week. And to answer another question of are they any good, well, let me put it to you like this. The very next day I ordered another one. I simply can't go foxing without it. I'll come on to that one in just a second. The second go-to caller is also best fox call, reed caller. This is a really versatile little call. You can put it in the mouth and change the pitch to it. I'll give you a very quick example here. So you can quieten that one down. It's brilliant at bringing foxes in, that one. I don't know how many I've had. This is my spare one. I keep this one in the truck, and I have another one on a lanyard that goes in a pocket, and when I'm out foxing I'll simply hang it around the neck so I've got it if I need it. The third one, and this is a brilliant call. I should probably record it and sell it, but it's actually my lip squeak. It's accounted for dozens and dozens of foxes over the years, and it's a simple kind of high-pitched mouth squeak. Works very well if foxes are in the field and they're probably no more than a couple of 100 yards away, but it's very good at bringing them in. Okay, so let's have a closer look at the Icotec GC500, and then I'll go through with you guys some of my most favourite calls. So as I mentioned, my go-to caller is the Icotec GC500. Now, a week ago this one fell off the roof of my truck for the 3rd time, but this time I didn't realise I'd done it. Got home, wasn't there. So actually the next day ordered the slightly newer version. This is the GC500 Mark II, or Gen 2 as it's known. Couple of key differences. The first being that you've got these front legs here which actually help to raise the front of the caller up, helping to project that sound that little bit further. So that's quite a nifty little feature. Second feature, and one that will be invaluable to me at the very least, is the fact that it's got a tripod mount. So what I've got here is a Gorilla Pod, which is actually normally used for heavy cameras or camcorders, and with these legs you can actually wrap it round things. So I can actually go and wrap that around the roof of the truck, and I've driven round all night with that on there and it hasn't come off yet. So that's a very good feature indeed. Remote wise, they're actually quite similar. Although again you can see the caller that I have here that's certainly well used only has the one favourite button, and I'll show you an insert now, but the text on the screen of the newer remote is actually a little bit easier and clearer to see. The other thing that you have with the secondary, the Gen 2 model is 2 extra features. The first of which is the light itself. So on the earlier model, when you put the light on, it stays on for a period of time and then will go off automatically. On the Gen 2 model, the light itself, when you turn it on, you can actually turn it straight off again as soon as you've finished. So it will help to conserve the remote's battery life, and it also means you haven't got this orange glow hanging around if you hang the remote off a lanyard like I often do as well. The other two functions that the remote has over the Gen 1 is a pause button, so you can actually pause the call midway through and then continue from exactly where you left off. On the previous generation model, if you press stop and play again, it'll play the call from the beginning of the call. Okay, so that's one extra feature. And then you can also see a decoy button here on the Gen 2 remote control. In the back of the caller, there is a port labelled up as decoy. You can actually plug in a little thing that spins round with some feathers and stuff on it as well to attract the attention. It's not so much used here in the UK. I believe the guys over in the US tend to use them for coyotes when they're getting them in the daytime and stuff. But those are a couple of the key differences between the Gen 1 and the Gen 2 model. Whether or not it is the case, I don't know, but maybe it's because it's fallen off the truck a couple of times. But the Gen 2 model also does sound that little bit crisper as well. And again, I'll put a link in the description below as to where you can get yourself one of these. So which calls are the best? Well, look, what I'll do for you is show you my favourite calls, and I'll briefly describe the types of scenarios I will use those calls in. Okay, so on the new remote I've got Favourites 1 and Favourites 2. Favourites 1 is my typical animal distress calls. Now I find that these calls work best in stubbles, so at the end of the harvest when you're in the stubble fields, and also at the beginning of typically pheasant season when lots of the younger birds are still out and about as well. So my go-to call, and this is one, it's brilliant for getting foxes coming bombing in, especially dog foxes, I don't know why but they seem to love it, is the Architect pheasant distress call. I'll play it for you now so you can hear just exactly what that sounds like. Okay, so we can just simply press stop on there to stop that caller. The other thing I'll do is if I see a fox and the fox is coming in, I will then use the volume button on the remote control to just bring it down a little bit to entice that fox to come that little bit closer. But as I often find it, they're pretty committed when coming into that call. One of my other favourite calls, again, and it's a good one at getting foxes in from distance, is actually the field rat or rat distress call, and that goes a little bit like this. One of the other favourites as well is rabbit distress call, which actually doesn't sound too dissimilar to the squeals or high-pitched noises you can actually achieve with the reed mouth caller itself. As you can see from the trees behind me, autumn is in full swing. It's actually Halloween today, so tomorrow is the 1st of November. Myself and Rick were out last night and we actually shot 7 foxes, but we saw 11. At this time of year, foxes are pairing up, so my favourite 2 call list on the new remote control is all to do with vocalisation and fox mating calls. These calls are an absolute winner at this time of year. So my favourite call from playlist number 2 is Vixen in Heat, or fox mating call. Check this one out. It's a horrible, horrible noise, but it works a treat. Now sometimes if I'm in an area and I know there's foxes in it and some of the rodent calls or the pheasant distress calls hasn't worked, and I want to alert the fox's attention to the presence of potentially other foxes, I will actually use a couple of the barks and I'll flick between the vixen and the dog fox, because again at this time of year they can get quite territorial. So in favourites number 2 I also house the vixen and the dog calls. Let's have a listen to those. First of all, the vixen. And then we'll stop that one and we'll flick onto the dog. And there you go. Ooh. We've upset the corvids. Now, as to how long to call for, normally I give it between 5 to 10 minutes on a stand and then move on. Some of the farms we look after are pretty vast, so it can take you could spend a whole evening just doing a couple of sections of the farm. So depending on the size of the land, and also depending on time and how much patience you've got, that will determine how long you spend in a particular area. One thing I would say is don't be afraid to mix it up. People say if you start using different calls it upsets the foxes. I've personally not found that and had great success at changing the calls. Well, there you go, there's a little bit about the GC500. Now, my couple of top tips for calling would probably be, number one, typically use calls that the foxes are going to be after naturally. If you're in stubble fields, you know, they're going to be out mousing and looking for rodents and so on and so forth, so those calls will work well. If, like me, you're looking after pheasants and partridges, use the pheasant and the partridge distress calls. Those again work very well because it's what the foxes are going to naturally be looking to predate on. When it gets around to this time of year and foxes start to pair up to mate, simply switch to the mating calls or the fox vocalizations. Again, you should see some success there. Rule number 2 would be, don't be afraid to mix it up a little bit. If you've been on a stand for a good few minutes and nothing seems to be showing, don't be afraid to change the call. I've heard multiple times that people don't keep changing the call, it doesn't work. Well, all I can say is from personal experience that's simply not the case. I've been playing rabbit distress 1 minute, flip to a pheasant distress the next, and the fox that I had in picture then starts bombing in. Similarly, I've been using the electronic call with loads of different calls to no avail, started lip squeaking, and again I've had foxes running in. So don't be afraid to change the call up. Rule number 3 would be, if you are going to be using the electronic caller, you ideally want to situate it downwind, probably between 50 to 70 yards away from yourself. Ideally what you want is the fox's full attention on the call, not looking at what that thing is moving over there right next to the caller. Rule number 4? Well, we don't need a rule number 4, it's stick around and watch the rest of this video. Don't forget, you've still got time to be in with a chance of winning the ThruNite TC15 from last week's ratting video. I'll put a link to that in the description below. For now though, let's crack on with the fox in action.
Okay, right, so let's get ready for some foxing action. Here you can see me just out and about with the keeper, checking the snares, and as we are out and about we notice several fox feeding in some likely spots that it's not unusual, that because we've had plenty of foxes there before. So actually that very same night myself and the keeper went out. And I'm going to start off with quite an interesting clip here this week. It's actually a fox I spotted, and it was actually the roe deer that caught my attention first, the heat saw, so I checked it out with a thermal, but as you can see here we've got a fox that seems to be getting on this roebuck's nerves, and the roebuck actually charges at the fox. I couldn't take the shot because the fox just wouldn't stay still, and it was not one bit interested in the call. It clearly had other things on its mind. However, I think it was a night or two later I went back to the same location, in fact the field just next door, and we bumped into what I assumed to be the same fox. A night or two later, and I've actually got a guest with myself and Rick this night. I've got Chris from Tup North who's come down to see hopefully a bit of fox in action. Unfortunately we had a harvest moon. It was a really bright evening, and just as much as we could see foxes about, unfortunately they could see us from a good distance as well, and they certainly kept their distance that night. This is quite an interesting fox that I had a couple of weeks ago. That riverbank you can see in the background there is actually a sea bank. But between the grass verge where the fox is walking up and that bank, there is a drain which is a good 20 foot wide. Now this fox was first spotted the other side of that drain, and once I'd actually stopped it and shot it, I actually realised that it must have swam across that drain.
That was a good one.
Right near the river. That's a dog. Yeah, and he's been for a swim. No, he's been through that water.
Next up, we've got some good examples of the different types of calls employed to get foxes coming in. Here's my famous lip squeak with a fox absolutely bombing into it. Absolutely poleaxed a good sized dog fox there. Next up, I've got the electronic call playing the fox mating call. Yet another big randy dog. That one actually came running out of the pheasant cover. And here again I've got a good example of a fox spotted in the field, and I actually used the mouth reed caller here to be able to get this one coming in to pretty much the same effect. Notice how that second blast was just that little bit quieter because I already had the fox's attention, so I gave it that little blast just to get it committed. Now this is quite an interesting clip from a fox I had just under 2 weeks ago. The partridge pen is actually behind me, just the other side of the hedge, as the fox makes its way through a cut maize field. As soon as the fox was in range and I was comfortable with the shot, I stopped it with a noise, and I got that horrible click sound, and nothing happened Duff round. So I was very conscious that the fox was now aware that something was there, so I very gingerly tried to cycle the round, but the trouble is if you do that it's not going to actually eject the casing out of the gun. So I quickly did it, got ready and took another shot. But because I was rushing at this point and I'd had to move slightly further to the right, the shot made actually fell a little bit further back than I would have liked, so it wasn't a first fatal shot. So as quickly as I could, I took the follow-up shot as the fox dropped to the deck, and the second shot actually made it into the brain box and put that fox out of its misery as quickly as I could. And there you go. A couple of nights later, and I'm out with my wingman Mark, and we'd managed to lip squeak this fox straight out of the pheasant cover at just over 130 yards when Mark takes the shot with his Hauer 1500 in 223 as I film it through the Pulsar thermal binocular.
Great shot.
Shut us up.
Another dog. Wow. Wow. That's a surprise. Oh no. Perfect. Perfect.
And you can really see here with these gnashers why once they get hold of your birds, they're not letting go and they do some serious damage.
It's quite a 17, but it's definitely a 15 pounder. Let's have a look. Most definitely.
No, maybe not actually.
He is. I don't know, he is. He's dead on 16 pounds.
Is he?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Believe it or not long after weighing that fox and getting it in the truck, we actually scanned the same field again and saw yet another fox crossing our path, although this time it actually caught wind of us and actually bolted straight back into the cover, as you can see here. A couple of nights later, and I'm actually out on a solo mission this night, and this fox itself, I actually thought it was a muntjac deer at the time, so I was just recording it until it moved its head to the side and I could clearly see the snout of it. I quickly got the rifle out, got up on the bonnet and took the shot.
Well, I'll be damned. Well, I can't believe that one literally just pulled into the farm. You can see his eyes glistening there, look. My squirrel feeder is in the woods just here. And I just thought, I've often seen muntjac up here, but I had a quick look through the thermal. I even started recording thinking it was a muntjac quite close, and then it moved its head. So I got out quick, sharpish. I bet this is a dog fox because I've seen this one the other side of the road here. Not the world's most testing of shots. Straight in the bib. Certainly done the business. Is it a dog? Yes, it is. The keeper will be happy with that one. Great result. Yet another one spotted with the thermal. That's the third one I've spotted with the thermal tonight. I think if I'd have lamped that one, it'd have been on its toes. Another great result. Third one tonight. Top stuff.
Next up, a fox with just the one eye. We'd actually missed it with the first shot, this one. Carried on up the farm and bumped into it again and very quickly took a second shot. But yeah, this is a good one to have got out of the way. Once again, it came out of the pheasant cover, so plenty of pheasants saved this last couple of weeks.
He's alright, Bobby Dazzler. Eating that trailer. No. He's a corker. You go on and breathe, buddy.
I love to see these little things, but they are bloody everywhere. Here's another fox. Look at that. The pheasant cover is literally right behind it. I knew this fox was coming out simply because the hare in the foreground here had come bombing out of that cover moments before the fox, so I knew damn well something had scared it. So it was a case of putting my gun in the right place, and as the fox came out, lip squeaked it to the exact right time. I was stood up over where Mark is by the truck over there and shot it off my Primos trigger sticks, so I pinged it to see the exact range, and there you go, 141 yards off of sticks. Not too shabby. Still being fairly new to the thermal game, I wasn't quite sure in myself as to whether or not this heat source was at first a hare or a fox laid down, but as soon found out as it moved off I could clearly see it was a fox. So I stalked in a bit closer to where it was going to head to, and lo and behold there was two of them. So I stopped them with an oi, and from what I could see that must have been a dog fox simply because of the size of it, but the vixen was very much on her toes and was not stopping for toffee.
That'll be the dog. Here's a big one. Look at the tail on that. There's a corker. Well, that's a dog, isn't it?
Yeah, an old as well.
He's a big one, isn't he?
Yeah, it's an old one. Look how grey he is.
Is he wet? Do you reckon he's gone across that drain?
Yeah, look, it went through.
Yeah, I bet he did. I bet he swam across that
Yeah,
drain.
he is. You feel that?
Yeah, I see it.
There.
It's a 15-pounder.
It's a good one.
So yet another one called in with the mouth caller. Like I said, if I'm not in a position to be able to get the electronic caller out and the fox is a little too far for the mouth squeak to be effective, this really is an awesome caller. Never leave home without it. This is me lip squeaking again. Having gotten back to the truck with a fox we'd just retrieved, I noticed a heat source over the other side of the cover. This is the biggest fox I've shot for quite some time, even though that was a perfectly central shot, and in a minute you'll see a big hole in the side of the fox. God knows how it managed to run as far as it did. So at the minute, the reason the rifle's looking at the floor is I'm tracking it with a thermal to make sure I can see where it drops. I know damn well the fox is going to go down. He runs out of steam. That's the cover crop there. He runs out of steam and drops right before the cover crop. But I'll stick another one in it just to make absolutely certain that it's over with as quick as possible.
Yeah, that is a big one. He is nearly 20 pound. He's 19 pound.
Yeah, it's a good fox.
Indeed, it was a very big fox, as you can see indeed. Now then, did somebody say something about 2 rabbits and 1 shot, and was it viable at the start of the video? Let's find out. I would say that was pretty conclusive. Check these rabbits out versus 223.
I've just seen bits fly off it. I hope you enjoyed tonight's video. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, stay safe, and happy shooting.